Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Reza Putranto, and my partner is Nuril Hudi Habibi. Today, we will bring out our topic in chapter 12 about language, gender, and sexuality. And now, this topic actually explain relation between language, gender, and sexuality. Of course, it deals with sex and sexism in language system, with issues connected to language planning. How discourse of gender and sexuality are encoded in language used in both public and private contexts of use. And finally, how people use language in ways that are linked to their gender and sexuality. Depend on the books by Wardell and Fuller, An Introduction to Sociolinguistics. There are six key concepts. There are gender and sexuality as sociality construct, how language use can be accessed, and gender, sexuality, ideologies, and discourse, generalization about male and female speech, power issues in gendered language use, and the last is gender and sexuality identities as socially construct. And now let's find out what is gender, sex category, and sexuality. Sex categories are based on the biological distinction, of course, is between male and female. But how about for others? Okay, depend on the book. There are two terms to identify their identity. For the first is transgender, and the second one is cisgender. Transgender is people who are transitioning or have transitioned from one sex category to another. And cisgender is talk about people whose sex category matches their gender. Mean people who are assigned female at birth identify as a girl or woman, and most people who are assigned male at birth identify as boys or men. These people are cisgender. So it means a normal. But for transgender is, I can say, is abnormal because some people have a gender identity that doesn't match the sex they were given at birth. For example, they were born with vagina and uterus, but they identify as male. They feel like a male. These people are transgender because they feel not like their own. That's transgender. Gender, although based on sex categories, is culturally construct. What is considered to be masculine or feminine differs from one society to another. Okay, depend on West and Zimmerman. Doing gender, that's idea that gender is not something we have but something we do. And still from the book, Cameron state that sex is a word used in connection with the biological construct characteristics that mark humans and other animals as either male or female, whereas gender refers to the cultural traits and behavior deemed appropriate for man or woman by particular society. In performance of gender, speakers draw on ideologies about what it means to be a man or a woman. For example, women may give each other compliments on their appearance, while men exchange ritual insults, speech act which draw on stereotypes of women, seeking solidarity, and men constructing hierarchy in conversation. Then, sexuality. It is related with individual identity in terms of his or her sexual activities. For example, certain types of masculinity rely heavily on heterosexuality, while other identities explicitly involve gay masculinity. We also have stereotypes about identity categories such as butch or femme lesbians. Sexual identities are not just about being gay, lesbian, straight, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. Of course, they include performance of being available, free to choose, promiscuous, asexual, or fetishizing certain things, acts, or types of sexual partners. Sexist language. In my comprehension, sexist language, it's like you mention the word, but the word is referring to man or women, male or female. And sexist language is divided into two: grammatical gender marking, and the second one is language change. Depend on the book, we must take a note that grammatical gender marking is more extensive in some languages than English and present different problems in attempts to make language more gender neutral. And then Mills 2008 notes that the word of minister in French is masculine, or in France is les minister. So it is difficult to refer to a female minister. Further, the norm in language such as French and Spanish is to use the masculine plural for groups containing both men and women. While this is traditionally also true in German, some changes have occurred, including more use the feminine plural ending innen instead of the masculine plural n for groups of men and women, and in some cases the introduction of words that do not mark gender for plurals. For example, the plural for students, traditionally studenten, using the masculine n plural ending, was in some cases during 80s and 90s replaced by student innen. For clear example, you can see on slide 8. Language change. Identically with gender asymmetries, it is common to refer to adult females as girl even in a professional context. Actually, between grammatical grammatical gender marking and language change actually have same concept, but for language change is more simply. For example, actor and actress. Actor is referred to men and actress is referred to women. Waiter and waitress. Waiter is referred to waiter male. Waitress is referring to uh, female waitress. And governor and governess, master and mistress. Okay, that's all of my presentation. Now I will give it back to Nuril and time is yours. Thank you.
Next is about discourse of gender and sexuality. Vericlo in 2003 described discourse as a way of representing facets of the world, that is the process, relations, and structures of the world, as well as feeling, thought, and belief upon the social world. While Johnstone in 2008 described discourse as conventional ways of talking which create and are created by conventional ways of thinking. Discourse has two aspects. There are linguistic aspects and ideological aspects. Linguistic aspects deal with conventional set of choices in language, while ideological aspect deals with pattern of belief and action. Cameron in 2008 makes the important point that we do not define ideologies as beliefs or attitudes, but as a representation that these gender ideologies are not distinct from the truth about gender. Next is about some common discourses. Discourses about gender and sexuality influence and shape how we think about sex categories and the people who belong in them, as well as other categories having to do with sexuality. Among discourses of gender and sexuality that we can identify, the discourse of heteronormativity is one of the most pervasive. This discourse requires an assumption that of heterosexuality and the stigmatizing of gay and lesbian identities. One study showing how heteronormativity begins in primary school is Reynolds in 2000 which addresses how discourses about girls needing to be attractive to boys but not dirty is pervasive, and contrasts with boys' construction of heterosexuality through fighting football, homophobia, and misogyny. Next is about deficit, dominance, difference, and identities. Gender exclusive language is a situation in which men and women have different ways of speaking that could be deemed different language or at least distinct and named dialect of a language. This situation can be found in Australian Aboriginal language and Japanese, where between men and women have different ways in speaking. Japanese women show their women when they speak, for example, by the use of a sentence final participle ne or another participle wa. A male speaker refers to himself as bogu or ore, whereas a female uses watashi or atashi. So if we observe how the men and women speak, we will find different ways of how they are speaking. The next is about women's language. Research which seeks to apply social theory and answer a question about the relationship between language and gender or sexuality was launched by a provocative and insightful work by Lakoff in 1973. The title is Language and Women's Place. Lakoff discusses position of women as defic- deficient to men, less confident in what they say, and less able to participate in serious activities in the social sphere. The next is about dominance. Dominance approach also addresses power relation between the sexes. In cross-gender conversation, women ask more questions than men, use more back-channeling signal to encourage others to continue speaking, use more instance of you and we, and do not protest as much as men when they are interrupted. On the other hand, men interrupt more, challenge, dispute, and ignore more, try to control what topics are discussed, and are inclined to make categorical statements. Is about difference. Men and women are assumed to speak differently. Men and women are claimed to have different conversational goals, and thus, although they may say the same thing, they actually mean different things. Maltz and Porter in 1982 proposed that in North America at least, when the two genders try to communicate with each other, the the result may be miscommunication. The hmm a woman used quite frequently means only I'm listening, whereas the a man used tend to mean I'm agreeing. This is about gender and sexuality identities. Identity may be constructed through a variety of linguistic means. The use of certain lexical form of language varieties may contribute to the identification of speaker, just a particular communicative practices such as silence, greeting formulas, or case do. Heller in 2007 points out that the concept of identity along with community and language are heuristic devices which capture some elements of how we organize ourselves but which have to be understood as social constructs. That's all from Mr. Reza and I. Thanks for your attention.